Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today we're going to be analyzing last night's primaries and what it means for the 2018 general election. So we're starting off in Minnesota. Keep in mind this is a Clinton state from 2016. Here we have the numbers from the Minnesota caucus back in 2016. I don't know if they have a primary map, but I'm pretty sure it was just a caucus. But Bernie Sanders won with 61.6% of the vote, 118,000 votes, and a total of 191,000 votes in the Minnesota caucus. In this Democratic primary, we have 582,000 votes on the Democratic side, which is a very considerable amount. On the Republican side, it's only 320,000. So clearly, the Democrats do have a lot more numbers on their side, even though this is a Democratic state. This is something that we've seen throughout all of these primaries tonight, including one state that Donald Trump carried, which is the state of Wisconsin. So here we have the Minnesota caucus numbers. I guess Bernie Sanders swept every congressional district because they don't have a county map for some reason. However, on the Republican side, it wasn't that close of a race. Donald Trump came in not really a close third, but on the Republican side, there was a close race. On the Democratic side, there was also a close race, but also polling wasn't correct about this. Lori Swanson was supposed to win, according to the most recent poll taken by Emerson. She was supposed to win by 1%, with 29%, Tim Walz at 28%, and Aaron Murphy at 19%. Well, the numbers finished off Lori Swanson at 24.6% in third place, Aaron Murphy at 32% in second place, and Tim Walz at 41.6%. So also this map is pretty interesting. However, when you look at the areas that, let's say, Tim Walz did pretty well on the purple down here, it's in some key Democratic areas, so it's more important than some other areas, but Democrats weren't as unified as they could have been, especially in something like this. However, it was a very contested primary. On the Republican side, unification is not that important of an issue for a state like Minnesota, especially with the GOP there. However, Tim Pawlenty, also if we look at polling there, was also supposed to win by a considerable amount early on, and then all of a sudden it narrowed down a little bit, but he was still expected to win. However, Jeff Johnson was able to finish off with 52.6% to Tim Pawlenty at 43%. So you could say polling was exactly right in terms of his percentage, but all 23% of undecided voters went to Jeff Johnson. So I guess that's pretty interesting. But Jeff Johnson wins with 52.6% over Tim Pawlenty, so a considerable lead. Tim Walz wins by around the same amount on the Democratic side. The numbers are not looking good for the GOP. However, when we look at the Senate race, not that important either. Just both candidates sweeped their maps, obviously with Amy Klobuchar being the incumbent. And then we look at here, Tina Smith sweeped every single county. She is the incumbent as well. Karen Housley wins almost every county. Not almost every county. She wins a great amount of counties. And the House districts, let's look at House District 1. This is a contested race, more Democratic votes than Republican votes. A warning sign, like it is almost all the time. In House District 3, we have an incumbent, 69,000 votes. Could be good or bad for the Democrats. Not that much to see in some other races. In House District 5, of course, not that much to see, but 135,000 votes for the Democrats, 15,000 votes for the GOP. And then in House District 8, this one is pretty interesting. 68,000 votes for the Democrats and 49,000 votes for the Republicans. So a considerable lead for the Democrats in that state. So Minnesota overall looking good for the Democrats. But let's say that's a Democratic state from 2016. Why is that important? Well, let's go over and take a look at Connecticut. So there is a hotly contested governor race, and the current incumbent is very, very disapproved. So obviously it would look like there wouldn't be that much excitement for Democrats, but they were able to get more voters than the Republican side with 212,000 votes, 243,000, but it wasn't around the same, ratio as what we saw back in 2016. There were a lot more votes on the Democratic side and then the Republican side, and now it's just a little bit more. So that is also a warning sign, meaning the GOP could also do very well in terms of the governor's race here. This is a race where it's going to be very contested because of the unpopularity of the incumbent governor. So my screen recorder decided to be mean and cut out, but we have I was just talking about the Connecticut governor race, and pretty much this is going to be very close because of the unpopularity of the incumbent Democratic governor. However, this race could be narrowly edged out by the Democrats, but we're not seeing similar numbers to what we saw in 2016, so these margins are going to get a lot closer. Probably not in the Senate, though, considering the popularity of Chris Murphy. So we finished off in Connecticut. Let's go to another Democratic state from 2016 and compare it to where it was back in 2016. So here were the numbers in 2016, 134,000 votes on the Democratic side, 61,000 votes on the Republican side. On the Democratic votes, we have 57,000 votes and 35,000. So the Democrats definitely did go down because they have around, 57,000 compared to 134,000. The Republicans went down from 61 to 35. However, the governor election is going to be very interesting. Phil Scott is expected to win. He's currently rated as safe. However, there are more votes on the Democratic side than the Republican side, but that is likely because this is a Democratic area, and nobody switches to the GOP just to vote for someone they already know is going to either win the general or win the primary when you're already a Democrat who's just voting for a GOP candidate, which doesn't really make sense whatsoever. So nothing to see in the U.S. Senate race, nothing to see in the House district at large. So pretty much Vermont, exactly how we would expect it, except the governor's race will likely go to the GOP this election season. Just comparing it 2016, we're seeing around the same margins in the Senate race, but not so much in the governor race. And then we can go ahead and take a look at the final state. So the state of Wisconsin, this is a state that Donald Trump carried in 2016 by 22,000 votes, more Democratic voters than Republican voters. And while you can argue this is a Democratic state, but if we go ahead and take a look at 2016, there were just around 100,000 more voters on the Republican side than the Democratic side. So those are numbers to focus on. If the Democrats are able to get more voters out in the primaries, which they weren't able to do in 2016, which kind of foreshadowed a Trump victory in the state of Wisconsin by a very narrow margin, it looks like the Democrats are doing very well here. And also, opinion polling was correct about this race. This was one of the very few races where the polling was corrected. Tony Evers wins in every single one of these polls. And it was by a considerable amount, too. There weren't any people who actually got close to him. The second place person had 10%. Well, if we look now, the second place person got 16% compared to 41.8% for Tony Evers. So it looks like it's beneficial for the Democrats there. Not a contested race on the U.S. Senate race for the Democratic primary. Leah Vukmir, who won the Republican primary. Kevin Nicholson was originally supposed to win. This is where the polling was incorrect, but we'll see a narrow victory for her, but she will face off Tammy Baldwin in the U.S. Senate race, but Tammy Baldwin is expected to win at the end of this. And House District 1. So Randy Bryce got 59.6%. Keep in mind, this is Paul Ryan's district. He's currently retiring. This is a district that has now been rated in the leaning Republican column and a toss-up by some as well. And there were 61,000 votes in the Democratic side, 59,000 on the Republican side. Keep in mind, this is the Speaker of the House's district. This race should have been very, very good for the GOP. Paul Ryan was winning it by huge margins. And then all of a sudden now, the Democratic primary has more votes than the Republican primary. It's not what we saw back in 2016. Also, we're looking at these numbers. It doesn't look good for the GOP either, because Randy Bryce was already expected to win, and he did win by around 20%. Brian Steele was expected to win as well. He won by even larger margin. However, if these two face off, it looks like the excitement is a little bit more on the Democratic side, especially with a retiring Speaker of the House. And what better way to send a message to the GOP than, defeat the Speaker without actually defeating the Speaker? If you remember 1994, the current, Democratic leader or Speaker was defeated in the House elections in that Republican wave year. So that's a very telling sign about a change in the country. Over in House District 4, with an incumbent, she has 76,000 votes, and the Republican primary only got 16,000. So obviously a lot more. Nothing really important in a couple of these races. The lieutenant governor race, not as important, but just keep in mind in the governor's race, there were more votes on the Democratic side than the Republican side, which is very interesting out of the state of Wisconsin, which used to have more Republican voters than Democratic voters. And also, this is a Bernie Sanders state, so it didn't look like it was too good for Hillary Clinton starting off into that election. And now it looks like Tony Evers could possibly win this election, especially if you look at polling between him and Scott Walker. It looks like he's currently leading in the most recent poll taken. So that pretty much wraps up the video today. There are a lot of important races to discuss, even though they may be in Democratic areas, such as the Vermont governor race or the Connecticut governor race, or in the Minnesota special election, Minnesota Senate election, and Minnesota governor election, and in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Senate election and the Wisconsin governor election. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.